Greetings from Washington, D.C. I'm Michael Nelson with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and I'm going to provide some opening remarks and then go immediately to our speakers. Our panel spans 3 time zones. We have 3 very interesting panelists with different perspectives on how technology can foster economic development and save the planet. So I want to spend a lot of time hearing their insights and then go to a discussion, both between them and with the audience. I've been in tech policy for more than 30 years. When I was in the Clinton White House, we spent a lot of time working with the World Bank and talking to foreign governments about how they could use technology for big nationwide projects, development projects that would change the lives of their citizens. But it was very top down. It was very much 5-year plans, $10 million investments, $100 million investments. That's what development was 20, 25 years ago. Today, we have these technologies that allow us to deliver applications and information and education on a person-to-person basis. And some of the things we'll be talking about today take advantage of mobile phones and this ability to let anyone anywhere plug into tools that will help them develop their personal economy and the economy of their local village or even their neighborhood. So we're going to do something different. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about national policies. We're going to talk a lot about specific examples. And at the end here, I hope we'll come up with some really interesting new ways to think about technology and development. I've been going to a lot of conferences. I've heard a lot of the same messages, public-private partnership and grand plans. Let's talk instead about the new internet way and cloud tools that can help foster development. So let me turn to our first speaker, and that is Sindhu, who is, as was mentioned, is the head of SAP Labs in India and also an executive vice president. She has been named by she was named by Forbes India as one of the top 50 most powerful women in business, not the 50 most powerful people in IT or in technology, but in business. She's leading a number of projects that are directly relevant to our issue at hand. Let me turn over to Sindhu.
Thank you, Mike. First of all, really nice being here on this panel and talking about such an important topic that's relevant for so many people across the world. Now, if you ask me, Mike, sustainability is clearly no longer an option for any one of us, right? I mean, doesn't matter which part of the world. And it goes without saying as well that sustainability has become a very strategic focus for, of course, organizations like us, but also governments and society at large. I mean, if you just look at CEOs, they are also making their strategic priority decisions based on focused on sustainability. Even if you look at investors, Mike, now they're integrating ESGs into their investment decisions. Even as consumers, all of us clearly are also making those very conscious shifts, right, to more sustainable products and using a lot more sustainable services. And if I just look at in my role at SAP Labs India or in general, the market out here, also from a talent point of view, employees are also making their career choices based on how the employer's responsibility towards the planet is, right? So today, I'd say business leaders need to do much more than just manage their top line and bottom lines to keep their investors happy. So all in all, Mike, sustainability is very, very critical to all stakeholders involved. And me being in India right now, I think India is clearly positioned as well than ever before to become, if you ask me, a model, right, of corporate sustainability for the rest of the world. And both large as well as small enterprises have a very unique opportunity to lead that change here. And I'm sure we're going to discuss a lot around this. So really looking forward to the conversation today, Mike.
Let me turn now to Manny, who is the head of Banyan Nation, which is really a poster child for the circular economy. They found some very innovative technologies for recycling plastics. And this isn't a pilot project. They've produced some 100 million bottles from recycled plastic. This is something that is not only innovated, this is a company that's not only innovated, it's also built a sustainable business model, and they've scaled up. And just recently, the World Economic Forum selected Banyan Nation as one of 100 tech pioneers. This is a global competition looking at companies that are doing something new with technology. So Manny, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. Really quickly, so what we do, or what we aim to do, is to bring about an equitable and sustainable future, leveraging technology solutions, both on the supply chain and on the plastics recycling end as well. I'd like to take a step back and give you a glimpse of how technology affects millions of recyclers in India, particularly plastic recycler, the plastic recycling network. But before I go on to speak about how technology can help them, I want to give you a lay of the land. If ever there was an Olympics for recycling, this is one medal that we would win, because India has millions of informal recyclers sitting at every street corner in the country. I mean, they're extensive, they're ubiquitous, and it's a very intricate network of recyclers. Now, what happens is any valuable material in the discarded waste streams is recovered by millions of such people and sent into the recycling economy. So when Raj, my co-founder and partner, and I returned back to India a few years ago, our first thought was, how do you harness the power of the informal recyclers rather than displace them to build a business solution for recycling and sustainability? And that is where Raj and I said, if we can somehow digitize and map the informal recyclers in our country and create a data platform where we understand the geospatial distribution of the recyclers, the prices, the volumes, their phone numbers, the frequencies at which they're trading, what it would allow us to do is it would allow us to leverage technology to get a bird's eye view of the waste flows in India. We did just that. And today we have thousands of informal recyclers in our supply chain who previously had access to the markets, but those markets were hyper local and hyper inefficient. Today, we eliminated the middlemen. We directly connect these informal recyclers to our recycling facilities so that companies like Unilever, Reckitt, Shell can have direct access to the markets of recovery and recycling. The other element of Banyan Nation's innovation is, while you can leverage digital technology to integrate the thousands of informal recyclers, how do you process the plastic and convert them into valuable materials that can be used in mainstream products and application, right? So there is a plastic recycling technology we've developed, but more importantly, there's another digital component here as well, right? Imagine you going to the shelf in India, and thanks, Mike, for bringing up the numbers and volumes here. Imagine you going to a store in India and picking up a bottle. In fact, Surf Excel, which is one of the biggest laundry detergent bottles in India, uses 50% recycled plastic in their bottles. And today the number is 200 million bottles. We've crossed 200 million, yeah. So when a consumer picks up a bottle, imagine if you're able to put in a digital signature in the bottle, creating a smart bottle, either a QR code or an RFID. And imagine if a consumer can engage with a brand and make sustainable choices. That is how you actually close the loop, right? A consumer can know which neighborhood recycler has picked up the material and the life journey of the bottle to Banyan's recycle facilities and how it goes back to the shelf, right? So technology really plays a great role in bringing an equitable, in bringing parity to the opportunities in the market. I guess that's the big takeaway. And most importantly, I think for us to develop an equitable and a sustainable future, you need to build technologies that are relevant and technologies that are accessible to the most marginalized and vulnerable sections of the society. Right? I mean, replicating technologies from Europe or North America in India with no context actually will not help build a sustainable future is something that I personally feel very strongly about. Mike, I saw your finger going up, so I got a lot of things to say, but yeah, I'll stop.
That's why we have the Q&A. Great examples of how these technologies can enable decentralized approaches, how they can empower individuals to take action, both the individual recyclers and the individual customers. So let me go next to Viveka Reisberg, who's coming to us from Sweden. And she's right in the middle of this issue of saving the planet and using these technologies to educate consumers.
Thank you so much, Michael. So Axe Foundation is a Swedish-based, as you said, nonprofit organization tackling local and global sustainability challenges. And believing strongly in innovation, we seek collaboration with partners that are willing to pilot new solutions that are scalable and with the potential to contribute to transformative change. And at Axe Foundation, I'm responsible for the focus area sustainable production and consumption. And when it comes to production, we usually engage with buying companies in their supply chain management, since they, through their business, have leverage on their suppliers. And I will share 2 examples of how technology-based interventions can contribute to sustainable change at the supplier level. And the first example is a mobile application called Move, targeting migrant workers from Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia, employed in the food and electronics sector in Thailand. Move is also a multi-stakeholder collaboration where 5 multinational companies came together in 2020 to tackle a joint problem, the suffering among migrant workers in Thailand as a consequence of the pandemic. And the companies in Move are sourcing food, electronics, and home appliance in Thailand. So they wanted to support migrant workers who make up a large part of the workforce in the supplying factories. And the migrants, they could not access accurate information in the native language. And this led to rumor spreading and misinformation. And this is in a group which is already vulnerable to exploitation. And the Move group, led by Axe Foundation, developed a mobile app with updated information and rights-based training in 4 languages. And the app is free of charge and possible to download for both Android and iOS phones. And it provides engaging training on ethical recruitment, workplace policies, health and safety, social dialogue, and COVID-19. And the app was launched in October 2020, and the pilot has given us a number of learnings. And one is that digital literacy in the target group is weak. Migrants mainly use social media to communicate, and hence there are behavioral barriers to overcome. But still, I think in a time of travel restrictions, when companies cannot monitor working conditions at their suppliers as before, an app can build capacity and raise awareness among workers, and it's flexible and scalable also to other markets. And in summary, a tech-based solution for a global social problem, vulnerable and exploited migrants. The other example I have is also related to suppliers, but is targeting the climate crisis. We are currently developing an online climate education for suppliers in different countries and in different sectors. The aim is to improve supplying companies' competence and climate leadership so that they can take action now and set goals and strategies to mitigate CO2 emissions. An online education in itself is not the innovation here. It's rather the perspective that we are targeting the suppliers, because there are many, many tools out there to measure CO2 emissions, but very few tools for suppliers who don't know what to do, how to start, and maybe don't even understand the need for transition in order to stay in business. And this is why we think this online education will accelerate climate action at thousands of factories in line with the Paris Agreement. And the online tool will be ready in March 2022 and launched as an open resource in May, June next year. So stay tuned.
Thank you very much. Another great example of using the cell phone and the laptop to educate people and change behavior. So let me start with the big question, and this is going to be for all of you, starting with you, Viveka. A typical company will spend about $1 in innovating, $10 in developing that innovation into a product, and then they have to spend at least $100 for each dollar of innovation to market that product, advertise it, and get people to use these tools. So this question is for each of you. How do we make sure everyone knows about these opportunities and start using them? There's so much advertising, there's so many different technology tools out there. Why should they pick up the application you're talking about? Why should they use the business tools that SAP is developing to track environmental impact? How do we get the word out, and how do we excite people about the opportunities of technology for sustainable development? So Viveka, can you start?
Yes, okay. I can take an example from Bangladesh, where we did a similar project, and there we got a lot of help from the suppliers. So we reached 30,000 workers quite quickly. In the case of Thailand, it has been much harder for some reason. We have worked together with suppliers, but also we have built a strong network among grassroots organizations and CSOs. We have a person in Thailand as well who are networking and, with stakeholder engagement in order for the CSOs to really reach out to the communities and, inspiring them, teaching them how to download, and explaining the benefits of this app, because I think it's, as you say, it's very, very difficult to reach out to, especially these groups with marketing. It's very hard. And I also think that another learning is that maybe an app it's good with an app, but we have an experience now from Thailand that maybe the market is not mature enough. Maybe we should instead go with social media channels where the migrant workers already are, and start there and really, listen, put your ear to the ground and look for their behavior and their needs and go where they are, instead of trying to squeeze or push something that is not, comes natural for the users.
Thanks for mentioning social media. And I need to mention that everyone watching this should be tweeting. And if they have questions, they can pose it on Twitter using the hashtag Global Tech Summit. If we can't answer the questions now, we can go online later. So Sindhu, how do we address this marketing question? You have hundreds of thousands of customers for your product, for your business platform. How do we get them to use the features that can help them reduce their carbon footprint, can help them recycle? How do you change that? How do you change their motivation?
Yeah, Mike, I think first of all, it goes back to what is your core purpose and what is it that you want to achieve, right? And as long as you're purpose driven, then you are able to also get to those target outcomes that you talk about, and very quickly also through exemplars, right? To be able to drive the change, because everybody is looking for small outcomes and outcomes which are very tangible to kind of follow. And I think as quickly as possible, if you're able to show very clearly what is the impact you're trying to make, right? Both yourself, like I'll give you an example. So we talk about sustainability and being carbon neutral in our own operations by end of 2023 at SAP. And you heard that from our CEO, Christian Klein, as well earlier today. Now, on one hand, it's about building products that embed our core sustainability metrics into the end-to-end processes. But like you rightly said, how do we get the message out? the only way you can get the message out is to actually show people how are we living it ourselves at SAP, right? And this is what we do. Each time a customer walks into our campus, and we, of course, make sure that they understand what we do, but we also go behind the scenes and kind of also show them how are we running our operations on our campuses in a very sustainable manner. So for example, today, 95% of our operations on our campus here in India are run using green energy sources. All our transportation for our employees is using EV vehicles, right? And with the charging stations right on our campus. So I think it's two aspects. One is how are we being an exemplar, and how are we also then enabling and scaling and multiplying through the power of technology. So I'd say it's really goes hand in hand to live it yourself. And then, of course, kind of expect others to, hey, if they can do it, we can do it too, right? I think that's important.
So Manny, same question. How much of the market have you reached, and how much more can you reach, and how are you doing that? Are you going beyond India, for instance? What's the marketing strategy for Banyan Nation?
Actually, I'll take a step back here, Michael. See, what I have learned, and Sindhu and Viveka maybe know more about this, but what I've learned through practical experience in deploying these solutions is, sometimes what happens is some of these technology solutions are dropped in the middle or not fully scaled because of a lack of either a profitable market or things like that, right? That's one of the things I've noticed. And the second aspect I've seen is most of these solutions sometimes are not well baked and adapted to the local need, right? And that is why these solutions actually don't hit the spot, and sometimes they dangle. Now, if I take a step back and give my personal example and Banyan's personal example, when we started developing the whole informal recycler mapping tool that you're talking about, the geospatial mapping platform, there has to be a compelling value proposition for the informal recyclers to be on the platform. And it has to be a pull rather than a push, right? Mapping all the recyclers in, let's say, Southeast Asia or Latin America or Africa is actually extremely easy. You've made a point saying that a lot of companies like us ask for grants, and 2 years later, we've dropped the project midway for whatever reason, right? So I strongly believe, particularly when you're developing solutions for sustainable development, there has to be a compelling value proposition. And I think that's what Sindhu was also referring to, which is you got to develop these products where the customers or the target audience is feeling a compelling value proposition to be onboarded onto those products and solutions. Just to close it off, sometimes our informal recyclers don't want to get on board because they already know who they can sell to. But if I show them that I can connect you directly to the markets that are more profitable, or give you access to finance that was previously not available to you, then they feel that there is a compelling need for you to come on board. And I think that is the best way to market and propagate these solutions in my limited scope and experience, Michael.
Thank you very much. So getting even more difficult. We've talked about the challenge of addressing environmental challenges. In so many countries, it's very hard to develop anything because they're failed states or they're a conflict zone. The last estimate I saw was that there are 55 civil wars going on around the world. Is there any thought of how we can use the technologies we're discussing to help people in these places where survival and avoiding being in the middle of a battlefield is the highest priority? I know this is a really tough problem, but this is a problem for hundreds of millions of people. And if we don't think about ways to eliminate conflict, or at least provide resources to people in spite of the conflict, we're not going to make much progress. So any ideas on this? And again, this is probably going to require that we go around the government In some cases, there is no government. It's going to require going straight to the cell phone of individuals. So tough question, but it's one that we don't talk about enough when we talk about sustainable development.
I can take a stab at it. In conflict zones, technology already, and I'm not saying it is enough, mobile technology, for example, and I gave you the example of the midwives being connected to mothers, right, during their time of childbirth. This was in conflict-driven Africa. Now, mobile technology fundamentally does that. Mobile payments already do that. Social networking already put people out of harm's way and allow them access to markets. Door-to-door delivery systems already do that. This is what we saw in COVID. I mean, you don't have to go to conflict zones. Think of India during the Corona crisis, right? We were all locked up in our homes essentially, and technology allowed us to get medicines and valuable replenishments for the kitchen or whatever delivered to your home. So technology already has a transformational power inbuilt, right? I mean, I think that's the point I was trying to make. However, for technology to really make an impact, access to the marginalized, the bottom of people at the bottom of the pyramid and the most vulnerable will be the most critical thing. I mean, so when you design systems, whether it is for sustainability, climate change, you need to always develop technologies that have the ability to impact the lives of millions of people at the bottom of the pyramid. I think it's a very broad way of putting it. Not sure if that answers your question, Michael.
And Mike, maybe just to add to what Mani already said, right? I fully agree with going to the grassroots with technology, and it's only possible with technology, right? That's the beauty of technology. I can just reflect on program Code Unnati that we have at SAP, which is exactly around closing that digital divide, right? And that whole area of how do we as corporates reach out to the citizens? How do we make sure that skilling is a key part, right? And I'm talking about basic skills, right? How do you even access the internet? Just as nothing complex, no ESGs here. So it's just the basic digital literacy. How do we reach that to deep down into parts of rural India? And that's what we're doing, right? How do we support that work within partnership? So recently we just joined forces here in Karnataka, where SAP has our largest operations in India, right? We joined forces with the government of Karnataka as well as with UNDP to kind of take the programs, the modules, the very small learning blocks that we have with Code Unnati down into the rural parts of Karnataka to ensure that the youth there, the women there have access to it. Because finally, it's about building out that skilling for the children, for the adolescents, for the youth, across all age groups, right? And doesn't matter which part of the world where they are located. I think through technology, we are able to really bridge that gap, give them the right skills that they need for surviving and then thriving, right? That's super important. And that kind of scaling out doesn't matter which zone, war zone, conflict zone, is only possible through technology. And I'm a strong believer of that. And through Code Unnati, I mean, we even have trucks driving into some of these remote parts of the country with everything built into that. And so that the children can come in there, be part of that experience of learning. And children really look forward to that. We have so many moving examples of children who have learned their basic digital skills and have access to a lot more today through programs like that. So it's all about how do we look at programmatically scaling access. And I think you talked about partnerships at the beginning, and I think that's very important, to scale.
So we're down to the last 3 minutes, and I had asked all of you to come up with a concluding tweet. Sindhu, I love what you just tweeted, which was, we need to use technology to scale up skilling for all ages. But you'll get a chance for another tweet. Let me turn to Viveka. What's your 45-second, one sentence tweet that you want everybody to remember from this panel.
Well, I think, in the wake of the pandemic, mobile tech tools have an increasing potential to reach people where they are geographically and also based on their needs. So that's my main take. Going from a top-down perspective, when monitoring, supplier companies and workers and people in rural areas, you can have this transition to a bottom-up perspective using tech tools and using technology that empowers individuals and people.
So Manny, 45 seconds. What do we need to do to fight poverty and fight the virus?
Apart from making recycling an Olympic sport, you mean? That's going to be my tweet. Make recycling an Olympic sport because it'll help India win more medals. Jokes apart, I think I'll repeat myself, right? Which is for definitely an equitable and sustainable future. We need to develop technologies that combat climate change, and they must be accessible and relevant to the most marginalized and vulnerable sections of the society. I mean, that's my fundamental takeaway.
So Sindhu, you get the last word.
Okay, since I already got a tweet, you said I'd go with, again, my point, right? Technology is both a foundational enabler and a critical multiplier. We talked about multiplying for achieving sustainable development much faster than otherwise, Mike. And I also would have a call out to all the corporates listening in. It's time to add a green line as a third dimension of success, in addition to the usual top line and the bottom line.
Those were all incredibly useful tweets. I'm going to tweet them. I hope other people will as well. I particularly like the idea of the green line and the idea that we need to work from the bottom up, the grassroots, and that's how we turn the planet into a greener, more vibrant, healthier place. So thank you very much. I think I now hand this off to our next panel, but I'm not sure how I do that.